And now the skid extends to 4 games. The Bruins, they are lost right now. I don't know what to say.
You are Locked On UCLA, your daily podcast on the UCLA Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to this edition of the Locked On UCLA podcast. I'm your host, Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer. Thanks for making this show your first listen each and every day. It's free wherever you get your podcast, and it's available on YouTube. Like, comment, subscribe. Thanks for your support. It's your team every day. And where we get started today, this episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. What didn't apply here is UCLA ending the skid. They dropped this one to Rutgers in this reaction episode to the UCLA-Rutgers game, 75-68. And the Bruins led for pretty much the whole first half, jumped out to a 7-0 start, had a great start. You're like, okay, great, this is going well. But the Bruins are lost. Mick Cronin finally switched up the starting lineup. He admitted post-game that it was a little bit due to Dylan Andrews being ill and some of it also being analytics-driven, which some of us are saying, well, it's about time to try something different. And the Bruins did. The big switch was to put Stefanovic in the starting lineup. He played 30 minutes as a starter, put up 8 points and 7 shots. So it wasn't the most effective, dominant shooting performance by Lazar, but he did shoot 40% from 3. In the end, it was the fact that UCLA led this game by 3 at half. In the second half, Rutgers came out after it just looked like Rutgers could have been leading in the first half. They were just missing shots, went on a roll, scored 45 points in the second half, jumped out on like an 8-0 blitz, and pretty much did not look back for the second part of this game. If you look at how much each team led, it's almost even. UCLA led this game for almost 20 minutes. Rutgers led this game for 18.5 minutes. That's about as even as it gets when it comes to each team having a lead. All right, UCLA led by as many as 7 early. They were up 7-0, then went up 14-7, and then Rutgers went on a little blitz. Their biggest run was a 10-0 run, and one of the biggest buckets they had was the answer to the late 3 where the Bruins, being down 9, cut it to a 1-point game, but couldn't get a stop on the other end, and that really hurt their chances with a minute left. So they fought, they clawed their way back despite not being able to stop Rutgers. In this game, UCLA had a lot of early success in points in the paint. And then in the second half, Rutgers was getting what they wanted in the paint. Pretty much evened up points in the paint, shot 31 free throws to UCLA's 15. In recent press conferences, you already had Mick Cronin yelling after the Maryland game about free throws and fouls and how his team couldn't move against Maryland. A little bit of a different tone in this game where UCLA sent Rutgers to the line 31 times. Rutgers won this game by 7. They made 9 more free throws while attempting 16 more. They didn't shoot spectacularly well from 3. 6 of 20. UCLA was 6 of 19. It's the fact that if you take away the 3-point shooting, that means they were 18 for 32. So anytime they took a shot inside the paint, they're almost making it better than a 50% clip. And what the Bruins did not do, almost for the first or second time all year, was force a lot of turnovers. UCLA forced 10 turnovers, which is much lower than how they came into the new year, forcing 18 turnovers a game. They'd allowed 55, 60 points a game. And now you look at where the Bruins are now. Since the new year, after that win against Nebraska, after that win against Gonzaga, they went to Nebraska. That was an ugly defensive slugfest. Nebraska scored 66. Okay. Then you've got Michigan, who put up 94. You go to Maryland. The Bruins gave up almost 80. Then you play Rutgers, and they almost gave up 80 again. 75 by this team given up is not going to cut it. I've spent all offseason talking about how this team was supposed to be the team that could score. And I know some people are like, this team can't shoot. They are not as bad as last year's team shooting the ball. Do not even compare the two. They are not. It is not the same ballpark. All right, this team is much better shooting. But it doesn't mean that they're not struggling miserably right now after their 4th consecutive loss. They headed into the new year. You win a game or two. That Nebraska game was a big swing game. If they had won that one, could have been 3-3 in conference play, maybe different vibes. Heading into the Michigan game, no, they have completely hit an absolute slump. Everything going on right now has just turned with Mick Cronin getting dumped on by the media, by the fans, and how UCLA's response has been since, which has been to just get outplayed by Maryland, get their butts kicked in the second half against Rutgers. And whether you're going to point fingers to the numbers of the free throw shooting or just to the fact that Rutgers has two fabulous freshmen with Harper, who went 18, 4, and 4 in 28 minutes, and despite handling the ball a lot, only turned it over 4 times. Huge for them. Or Ace Bailey, who went 20 and 10 with 2 rebounds, hit all of his free throws. Those guys combined to go 11 of 13 from the line, playing a majority of the game. That is where UCLA is struggling. Now, while the Bruins did put Stefanovic in the starting lineup, Cronin has continued to leave Sebastian Mack coming off the bench in 28 minutes. Mack got back to it a little bit, 16 points off the bench. You had Eric Daly Jr., who was scoring, but he wasn't shooting. And what do I mean by that? UCLA had an advantage in this game where they could have been more physical in the post. Rutgers is athletic and tall. They had the best big man in this game. And Eric Daly Jr. had a mismatch, but he couldn't shoot the three, including an open one to get UCLA back within one with less than a minute remaining. You had Kobe Johnson, who was probably the best shooter in this game, 13 points, 5 of 8 shooting. Cronin talked about an early second foul that limited Johnson's minutes to just 25. Could have been a major difference in this game, maybe if you saw more than 30, as Cronin's favorite on-ball defender. He's one of the best defenders to get steals, force turnovers. If he's missing 15 minutes of action, that's at least a couple of deflections and missed shots or steals that it gets a game. UCLA missed that in this game. We continue to see, after Trent Perry was a no-show for the first few games in this new year, Cronin has leaned on him a little more, playing a bit more in the Maryland game, 10-plus minutes in this game. But the Bruins, man, they have to go back to the drawing board. As much as UCLA is supposed to pride themselves on defense, they just have no identity on the offensive side of the ball. Bilodeau had one of his worst games, 0 for 7 from the floor, 5 rebounds, 6 points. And when you have an athletic big, Bilodeau playing the 5 is just not going to cut it. And I didn't ever have him in my preseason look at this team playing the 5. I'd put, one or two other options playing the 5. I thought Daly would be more of a 5. He's turned more into a stretch 4, and Bilodeau being that stretch 5. But the Bruins, man, getting out-rebounded in all the hustle stats, can't play defense if they're not turning it over. That's the big thing. They can't outscore their opponents, and when they don't force turnovers, they're not that good of a defensive team. And we'll touch on that more next on Locked On UCLA. This is a message from our sponsor, Intuit TurboTax. Taxes. They're like dealing with piles of paperwork and frustrating forms and then waiting and wondering and worrying if you're going to ever get any money back. Now you can do with taxes. All you got to do is easily upload your form to a TurboTax expert, and they're matched with your unique tax situation. The expert who's backed with the latest technology, which cross-checks millions of data points for 100% accuracy. While they work on your taxes, you get real-time updates on their progress, and you get the most money back guaranteed. All while you go about your day, no stressing, no worrying, no waiting. Now, this is taxes. Intuit TurboTax. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live full service, real-time updates only in the iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantee. All right, so now we're moving on to the second segment here. We're reacting to the UCLA Rutgers game. Dude, brutal. The Bruins, well, they had 3 guys get 13 or more. You had Daly Jr. who could score. You had Sebastian Mack who could score. But the Bruins, when they can't shoot it from 3 and they're not turning teams over, are a very, very, very beatable team. Very beatable. So when the Bruins aren't shooting 40+% from 3, or they're not forcing 15, 16 turnovers, they're easy to stop and they're easy to score on. The Bruins tried to negate the loss of Adembona by bringing in and using multiple players, with William Kyle transferring in. Hasn't exactly panned out right now. He's got another year to develop if he wishes, like any of these transfers with extra years. All wish to stay at UCLA or continue their careers here. Got another year to develop. the big jump up from the Summit League to Big Ten play is a big demand. And then a Diamata who's not consistently getting minutes or time or opportunities and maybe just not physically strong enough yet to do so. Remember, you got Devin Williams, who Cronin is basically having a year of him going to the weight room and just redshirt this year. Brandon Williams, a starter last year, redshirting. Eric Freeney, who is going to get lost in the backcourt logjam. He's redshirting. Not that all would have made a difference in the post, but UCLA, with this blueprint, is supposed to be a team on paper similar to how Cronin took them to the Final Four. Now, that Cronin-led team to the Final Four also got a good break in the bracket, figured it out right before the NCAA tournament, and went through their own struggles into the double-digit loss category, figured it out defensively, had that dude who could get buckets, played some nasty defensive games, and beat some good teams. UCLA already has some good wins, but when they play bad, and when all of this is falling backwards, and Cronin's calling them out, then he's getting ejected, and then he didn't really have a lot of answers. It wasn't his longest press conference after this one. He's at a loss of words, and there's not many times Mick Cronin is at a loss of words after a post-game press conference until, like UCLA has, lost 4 in a row. His calling card, the defensive side of the ball, the defensive side of the court, UCLA, it's been non-existent. And yes, you can say, all right, Nebraska scored less than 70, but in that second half, they put up points. Then Michigan's just a terrible matchup for UCLA. I know Cronin went and called his players soft. I disagree with that matchup, how they were called soft, because Michigan is just a terrible mismatch for the Bruins. Bruins forced turnovers, but they didn't force enough against a Michigan team who turned the ball over at any given point. Then you play Maryland, took it to the Bruins, who they themselves turned it over. Well, you saw the emphasis today was you go from 20 turnovers down to 9. Rutgers doesn't play that same relentless defense. They're young. They're hungry. They were a team that I remember watching them when they got waxed by Purdue at home by 18 the week prior. I was like, this could be a decent matchup for UCLA. You got some youngsters who could turn it over, as much as the sellout rocking crowd in Piscataway, New Jersey is going to fire up some youngsters on an early nationally televised Monday afternoon in Los Angeles game. It just gave more eyes to, man, UCLA has to figure something out on the defensive side of the ball. I know 21 points were scored from the free throw line, and it could have been even more if they didn't miss 10 free throws, did Rutgers. But Cronin said afterwards, layups and free throws. Not to harp on the officiating. It was, you can't just foul them so many times. You can't just give up layups. But at some point, what are we missing? Cronin had already talked about how his best defensive lineup early in the season, going into the year, is not his best offensive lineup. So what is he going to sacrifice? All right, who is he going to put in or out? After all the outcries, you saw Dylan Andrews, who Cronin did say in the postgame was ill, but UCLA needs more shooting. He saw had a backseat to sitting a bit more. Sky Clark, 29 minutes, is playing more of a point guard's role and not taking a bulk of the shots, or he has the capability of putting up 30 if given that opportunity. Sebastian Mack can score and do a lot of things with the basketball, but he isn't that shooter. Or when he is, he can be lethal, like he was against North Carolina and dropping threes. But if he's not shooting, which generally isn't his game at this stage of the career with consistency, the Bruins are rough. They are rough around the edges. I'm not sure what's going to change versus Iowa. UCLA just needs something good to happen. And when something good happens, maybe they can string along some wins. But Iowa and then Wisconsin at home, back-to-back, if that's how it goes. Remember, the women's game got moved from a Wednesday night home game at Pauley against Penn State to move to the Pyramid at Long Beach State, where Corey Close won her program record-breaking win to make her the winningest coach in UCLA women's history. And then you go to Washington. Washington is ready and capable to beat anybody in their home in Seattle. USC on the road on a Monday night, January 27th. There's a lot of entertainment coming up with these big games. In Oregon, that's no slouch. Michigan State on a Tuesday night in early February. It's not going to get any easier. That's the thing about the Big Ten. You're not going to go play a couple of bottom feeders and hope to get some wins. These are some tough teams. And UCLA, we thought, okay, could have been they're supposed to be a top-tier contender in the Big Ten. They're supposed to be, but there is just something off right now with this team. It is just absolutely frustrating. What can change? Well, we can talk about that next on Locked On UCLA. Attending the new 12-team college football playoff games, it's an incredible experience that brings fans together like never before, with all the excitement, thinking about the past playoff games, and you can't wait to make new memories and more moments with these updated formats and teams involved. Game Time's got a new feature to help you get to these games. It's called Game Time Picks. You can get to tickets for these events even easier. You can filter out all that fluff and get only the best deals. For me, when I've gone in recent times to the last 4 or 5 games, I've been checking out Game Time. I've gotten some great deals going to games across the country, going to games in my own backyard. And for the biggest games, they've got some Game Time picks. You can toggle in the all-in pricing, and you know exactly what you're paying when you're comparing prices, and Game Time has hooked it up for me. So check it out and take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE, LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Well, that is the Bruins. They're a little lost. They are absolutely a little lost. And you know what's going to change? You got to think about it. Eric Daly, since kind of shifting to a newer mask, the shooting hasn't exactly been there. Sky Clark hasn't exactly been the same since he took like 3 hard screens at Nebraska. You've got Dylan Andrews, who is in one of the worst shooting slumps of his career, and the Bruins without a true big man that Cronin wants to use. He clearly doesn't trust Mata, doesn't trust Kyle, and Dominic Harris is not in. He is buried so deep in the bench. UCLA's best incoming player at shooting the basketball, who, if you look at his highlights from LMU, can splash it from downtown. Absolutely. But he is not anywhere close to cracking the lineup. When UCLA is searching, he is not there right now for the Bruins. All right, like Cronin's not going to him. You can't place the blame all on that. But they're going 10 deep in a game, and the Bruins still aren't finding any answers. I think the Stefanovic switch is good, and I think the Bruins should keep rolling with that, with Johnson, with Daly, with Stefanovic, Bilodeau, and Clark. But then that gives you moments when you're trying to fit minutes in for Andrews, for Perry, for Mack, unless that means a severe reduction in minutes for Dylan Andrews. UCLA needs somebody to step up as a three-point shooter, as a consistent shooter that can knock down buckets. That's not Bilodeau, that's not Daly. Now, Johnson has times been that guy, but even with his numbers at USC, he was a 10-point-per-game scorer and a 30% three-point shooter, which kind of represented a step up from UCLA, what they had at that position a year ago, defensively and a little bit offensively. But I'm not going to lean on every game Kobe Johnson needing to score 13, 15 points and knock down 2 of 5, 3 of 6 from 3. That shouldn't be his job. Now, he's capable, but you're not going to game plan an offensive play or 2 or 5 to give Johnson the ball every single time. That is where you need Perry to knock down some threes. You need Dylan Andrews to get the confidence back, with Sebastian Mack hopefully shooting more, or just not sitting around the perimeter and going between the legs and going ISO ball. It's not working right now offensively. It just is not. And sometimes in basketball, you have to outscore the opponent. You can give up 45, but I'd like to see UCLA, given a 3-point lead at the break, not come out and give up an 8-0 run and look flat. Not give up Rutgers giving up back-breaking buckets, or if you're down 1, don't give up a 3. Give up a layup or something, and then still live to see another play where you can attempt to tie the game on the other end down the floor. But the Bruins are getting victimized, with Cronin saying his biggest weakness was in the post, and it is being eaten alive right now by all these Big Ten teams in the rebounding, points in the paint, on most nights both, and the only way UCLA can take away from that is when they play like they did against Arizona for the majority of the North Carolina game. Surviving the EK big night by keeping the tempo slow, hitting the threes, and turning over Gonzaga. The Bruins are nowhere like that team that played those last couple of months in 2024. It has completely shifted. Many factors playing into that, but I like the Bruins They got to find an extra shooter. I know Stefanovic is capable. It was a bad night. And maybe it just wasn't one of those nights for Stefanovic and he can get back to it. I think that's a good move for now. I'm not sure if UCLA at its peak form is going to have Stefanovic as a starting option or a bench option, but Cronin trusts him so much, he can go from 4 minutes one day to 35 minutes the next for no given reason. That is how much faith he's got in Stefanovic, who can play alongside Johnson at this point. But that also gives up some size, some athleticism. When you put Stefanovic in there for Johnson, it's on offense for defense, heart and hustle, kind of equal switch, putting both those types of guys on the floor, which takes away from the athleticism that Dylan Andrews, if he's going right, can get to the cup, can get that mid-range J that adds another element to the UCLA offense that they're just simply missing right now. They shot better than 40%. They scored 68, almost 70 points, but it's just not clicking. They have the heart. They're fighting. They're down 9. It's not like they turned this game and lost by 15 like they did against Maryland and saw that technical foul and the 6-point possession where Cronin got ejected against Maryland turned into the end of the game with 5 minutes left. Stuck in a similar situation like they were against Maryland. They turned this into a 1-point game with just about a minute remaining. So they're fighting. Now, is it the players, as Cronin says, missing open shots? We saw Daly miss some. You saw Stefanovic miss some. Or can you create things where they're just gimme buckets, dunks, layups at the rim and get guys with more confidence heading into an open shot? How much of this is coaching versus the players, or was it a bad recruiting class? I don't want to say it's a bad recruiting class. I think the players are capable. UCLA's already proved that. But right now, when they're stuck in a rut, man, they have to leave no stone unturned over these next couple of days, heading into Friday against Iowa, where the Bruins have an opportunity to fix things if they even get to play at home against Westwood, considering the women's game got moved. We'll see if that's played, if it's moved, how everything is turning out in the area at the moment. But they got to get home, and hopefully all is well. But right now, the Bruins, 4 straight losses. It's not looking good right now for the UCLA men's basketball team, and they've got to figure it out. It's still not even mid-January. Let's not forget that. UCLA has a 20-game Big Ten schedule. They've got 14 games to play, and they have 8 more to play at home. 8 more. Now they have a lot more airplane miles to log on and more sellout crowds, more antsy fans to go boo them and tell them, hey, go back to LA, go back to Westwood, yada, yada, yada. But the Bruins, it's, goodness gracious, it's just at a loss of words. Just like Cronin is, I'm at a loss for words. And maybe there's not a light at the end of the tunnel at the moment. They just got to keep digging, keep fighting, and get that one good result. Because one good result could be all this team needs to turn it into something positive and get on a run moving forward. All right? Just like that, we're going to wrap things up. 8 clap time, baby. We'll talk more UCLA recruiting. We'll talk how ESPN basically called out Mick Cronin. We'll talk about that in the next episode. And we'll talk about how the women's game got moved and what that means when they play Penn State coming up at the Walter Pyramid. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, A, UCLA. UCLA, fight, fight, fight. This has been Locked on UCLA. Zach signing off. Go Bruins.